This is Hart Hagen with the Climate Report in Louisville, Kentucky, and I would like to share with you why I say climate scientists and scientists in general don't get a free pass. Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you know everything. And in this case, just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you're not plain silly. I'm going to show you what I think is an analysis by climate scientists that is just plain silly. The title of this is No Free Pass. Scientists Must Earn Our Respect, one article, one interview at a time. The idea is that climate change is real, climate change is important, yada, yada, yada. But mainstream climate scientists demonstrate an infantile, silly, juvenile understanding of the problems and the solutions. They're completely focused on CO2. They act like nothing other than CO2 affects our climate, and therefore we don't have anything to do. We don't have, the only job that we have is to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. In this video, I share my understanding of the problems and the solutions. Hint, the problems and the solutions are closer to the earth, in our soil, in our forests, our landscapes, our deserts, our wetlands, our waterways, and our oceans. It's what we do to the ground. It's what we do to the land and the water that affects our climate much more than anything else. Plus, if we fix the bad things we're doing to our climate, to the land and the water, then there will be so many other fringe benefits. Let me give you a glimpse of the article that gave rise to this topic. And I need to get over here. Pardon me. Let me see. StreamYard, here we go, and go to that view. Now, this is an article about, it's from The Guardian. It's about climate scientists. It's from May 8th. And it says, we asked 380 top climate scientists what they felt about the future. And this streaming headline here says, hopeless and broken. Ruth Cerezo Mota of Mexico feels hopeless and broken. Anonymous from South Africa says, we live in an age of fools. Somebody says, I worry about the future my children are inheriting. Lorraine Whitmarsh of the UK. The subheadline says, they are terrified but determined to keep fighting. Here's what they said. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with the logistics of my platform today. Let me stop that screen and start another one. And it says, I'm going to go to, it's a presentation called My Home Landscape, but here is what I think is much more consequential than CO2. CO2 is important. We need to deal with CO2. Greenhouse gases have an effect, but there's more than one greenhouse gas, namely water is a greenhouse gas. Are we dealing with how to incorporate, how to involve greenhouse gases such as water in the water cycles and in the ecosystems? So I'm going to share with you three slides here. One is the benefits of healthy soil. One is how to make healthy soil. And another is what's in healthy soil. The reason I'm doing this, taking a little bit of a detour from our topic, is that I want you to know that I have an understanding of the real problems and real solutions. I'm not just taking pot shots at people. I'm not just focusing on the negative. I'm sharing with you where I believe the greater part of the solution lies, and it is in healthy soil. The benefits of healthy soil include, if we could get our soil healthy, if we could practice the principles of soil health in our landscapes, our farms, our wetlands, our see, landscapes, farms, and forests are the main ones where we need to practice the principles of healthy soil. We would accomplish the following. Number one, prevent flooding, drought, erosion, wildfires, and heat waves. Number two, healthy soil delivers nutrients to the plants and makes them nutritious and resilient to pests and pathogens. Number three, healthy soil can solve hunger and food insecurity. If we could have people in their communities growing their food where they live instead of relying on food to be shipped in from thousands of miles away, then this would tend to solve the problem of hunger and the problem of food insecurity. Number four, healthy soil it can increase the access to clean, fresh water because healthy soil absorbs rainfall, soaks up the rain, and makes the streams and rivers flow more consistently instead of the extremes of flooding and drought. A couple of years ago, the Mississippi River was low. Well, that wouldn't happen if we had healthy soil in the Mississippi River basin such that the soil could catch the rainfall and then release that rain gently over the course of time. Number five, healthy soil can build strong families and communities because people get to live and work. People get to eat from the land where they live instead of, having to always go somewhere to try to eke out a living and have their food shipped in from thousands of miles away. What I'm saying is that healthy, locally grown food can be the basis of a strong local economy, but that we need to grow the food first. And to grow the food, we need to have healthy soil. And to have healthy soil, we need to grow the food. It's a virtuous cycle because regenerative agriculture makes the soil healthy. Number six, I believe healthy soil could promote peace because when you distribute power and when you distribute the wealth meaning well-being, when the well-being is distributed out of the urban centers and into the land, then that is a formula for peace, because war is when a few people own things and have to protect it, but peace is when you have people able to defend themselves where they live and provide for themselves where they live. Next, so those are all the benefits of healthy soil. This slide is about how to make healthy soil. No time to go into this, but I try to hit upon this with some regularity because it's my single favorite topic in the world, soil generally, and specifically the principles of soil health. How to make healthy soil: limit disturbance, armor the soil surface, build diversity, living roots in the ground, and integrate animals. Anybody, anywhere can do this. If you have soil, you can practice the principles of soil health. This is very accessible to everybody. Everybody can implement this, and it's not even expensive. In fact, it's less expensive to make healthy soil than it is to destroy the soil, because destroying the soil takes time, energy, and effort. Lastly, on these three slides that I'm showing you to prove to you that I've thought about the solutions and I'm not just taking pot shots at people, not just being unduly negative. What's in healthy soil? My mission in large measure is to build awareness of what is in healthy soil so we will respect the soil and grow healthy soil where we are. What's in healthy soil? Living roots. Number two, organic matter. Number three, bacteria. Number four, fungi. Number five, protozoa. Number six, nematodes. Number seven, microarthropods. Number eight, arthropods. Number nine, birds and mammals. You have, what's in healthy soil? Living plants and all of the things, including the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, that go together to constitute the soil food web. If we were aware of this and we respected this, then we would spend less time, money, and energy destroying the soil, and we would spend less time, money, and energy ignoring soil health, which is what these scientists are doing in the article that I showed you. They're ignoring soil health. They're shedding tears and they're, woe is me, I'm such a good scientist. Meanwhile, they can't be bothered to focus on soil health, can't be bothered to focus on ending deforestation, and on and on. Now I'm going to stop that screen and present to you something else. And it is, let's go to the article that I wrote in Substack. This is Hart's blog on Substack is harthagen.substack.com, harthagen.substack.com. You can go there and become a free subscriber. And I also appreciate paid subscribers, but all the content is free to everybody. So let's say no free pass. So here's the article. No free pass. Climate scientists must hereafter earn our respect. One interview, one article at a time. We have a dysfunctional relationship with science and scientists. Scientists are not a substitute for doing your own thinking. Scientists are not a substitute for doing your own research. I heard it said that science is supposed to facilitate our understanding, not be a substitute for it. We neglect the role of logic and observation in favor of this deferring to authorities that are sometimes right and sometimes wrong. Authority is helpful, expertise is helpful, but it's not a substitute for our own understanding. So let's go down here. This part says, I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to expand this a little so maybe you and I both can see it better. My critique is as follows. Mainstream climate scientists are engaged in the business of selling the public a false narrative. That false narrative is not only is carbon dioxide important, but that it's the only problem worth talking about, and every other environmental issue has to wait until we somehow manage to lower carbon dioxide emissions. Let me focus on that for a minute. So we have gotten into this rut of focusing on carbon dioxide is the key to the climate, and climate is the key to the environment. Somewhere along the way, especially in the last 10 years or so, we've gotten the impression that solar panels and wind turbines are the answer to all of our environmental problems. We somehow along the way started to ignore pollution. We started to ignore deforestation. We started to ignore pesticides. We are ignoring extinction, the rapid extinction of vertebrates. So in the last 50 years or so, these are approximate figures, but they're surprisingly consistent from the research that I've seen. In the last 50 years, we've lost 70% of insects. The numbers vary depending on the study, depending on what you look at, what you're measuring. In the last 50 years, in rough terms, not like precision, in the last 50 years, we've lost 70% of insects, 70% of wild mammals by biomass, not by species, but by biomass. If you put them all together and weighed them, we've lost 70% of the biomass of wild mammals. We have domestic mammals in terms of livestock. We have domestic birds, livestock, but wild mammals, wild birds, amphibians, and large fishes and insects, we've lost 70% of them in the last 50 years. If that's not an emergency, I don't know what is. If that's not an environmental concern, I don't know what is. But environmental activists and scientists are acting, they're completely ignoring that. If you want people to get your message, you have to have some repetition and some consistency. It's not about what you talk about sometimes. It's not about what you talk about once in a great while. It's what you talk about consistently. The public begins to understand that whatever it is you're talking about consistently is what really matters. Scientists are not talking with any consistency whatsoever about the extinction events that I just told you about. They're totally focused on carbon dioxide, and they're totally focused on a narrow set of solutions for carbon dioxide and that are going to be ineffective and inconsequential. If you ask me, electric cars, solar, and wind are going to be completely ineffective at lowering carbon dioxide in the short term or the long term, because we're not looking at the carbon footprint of these technologies. Furthermore, if you have a growing economy with growing energy demands, the effect of solar and wind is trivial. And the effect that solar and wind have in lowering our carbon footprint is trivial in an economy that has an insatiable hunger, insatiable appetite for energy. Let's move on. So here's the thumbnail that goes with this, and I'll talk about it for a minute. No free pass. Climate scientists must hereafter earn our respect. Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you're a genius. It doesn't mean you're God. It doesn't mean you're always right. Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you're not bought. I'm sorry, scientists are like everybody else. They earn a paycheck. They're getting funded from they're getting funded from wealthy institutions, whether those institutions are the federal government of the United States, whether those institutions are big corporations that themselves have an agenda. Somebody signs your paycheck. Scientists are people just like everybody else. They have a mortgage and they want to put their kids through school. They're not above reproach. They're not beyond reproach or above scrutiny. No free pass. Climate scientists must hereafter earn our respect. Stop ignoring your critics. So there are 4 things to stop ignoring here. Stop ignoring your critics. The Bright Green Lies, the book, is a fabulous critique of renewable energy, so-called renewable energy. Stop ignoring Bright Green Lies by Derek Jensen, Lee Keith, and Max Wilbert. Planet of the Humans is a fabulous critique of renewable energy, solar, wind, electric cars, and biomass energy. God help us. Biomass energy means we're deforesting, we're cutting down our forests, especially in the southern United States, but also in heavily forested areas like British Columbia, Indonesia. They're cutting down our trees and burning them like coal in a process that is every bit as carbon intensive as burning coal. It's as dirty and polluting and carbon intensive as burning coal. It fails on its own terms. Biomass energy, I'm talking about cutting down our trees, cutting down our forests, clear cutting our forests, removing all the value and benefit of a forest for the sake of doing something that is supposedly renewable, because eventually It'll grow back, but eventually that's a whole other conversation. Scientists are not talking about this. The climate and the climate movement is not talking about this with any consistency, with any regularity. The Sierra Club, they take a position on it as if that ought to be something, but they're not talking about it. What they are talking about is solar and wind and electric cars, which happen to be profitable. And there's the rub. If it's profitable, it gets a lot of airtime. If it's profitable, it gets a lot of press. Moving along. Here's an analogy that I developed here. Let's pretend that the heart is the only organ that matters. Imagine I'm a heart surgeon. Imagine I'm a heart surgeon and I say three things. The first is okay. The second is a little messed up. And the third is completely nuts. So as I'm a heart surgeon, so I have all of this authority. This is hypothetical. If I have all of this authority as a heart surgeon and I say, the heart is one of the most important organs in the body. Who can argue with that? But I take it a step further and I say, the heart is the most important organ in the body. And I'm like, I don't even have to be a scientist to argue with that. I can say, well, the brain is important. The brain regulates heart function, and the brain can't be replaced. You can replace a heart these days. People get heart transplants. You can replace a heart, but the brain can't be replaced yet. So I can argue with that. If that's your opinion, if your opinion is that the heart is the most important organ in the body, I feel free as a non-scientist, as a non-physician to argue with that because you're overstepping your bound. Now, take it a step further and I say, the heart, I'm a heart surgeon, hypothetically. The heart is the only organ that matters. And I say, you are out of your mind. The brain matters, the kidney matters, the skin matters, the lungs matter, the stomach matters, the intestines matter. You could go on and on and on. The muscle system matters. You are out of your mind if you say that the heart is the only organ that matters. And I'm not a heart surgeon, and I feel so that's hypothetical. Heart surgeons aren't saying this. But climate scientists are saying in so many words that carbon dioxide is the only thing that matters. They're not saying that verbatim, but if they focus on, we're going to talk about three things today: carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide. We're going to talk about how carbon dioxide heats the planet. We're going to talk about how carbon dioxide causes floods. We're going to talk about how carbon dioxide causes droughts. We're going to talk about how our carbon dioxide causes heat waves. We're going to talk about how carbon dioxide causes wildfires. Furthermore, so the story goes, carbon dioxide causes war and hunger and water scarcity. It just never ends. And if you don't believe me, Google climate change and click on the first article that comes up when you Google climate change is from the United Nations, and the title of the article is "What is Climate Change?" And it will read that and see if they're not focused exclusively on carbon dioxide. So what else matters besides carbon dioxide? What else matters to climate, and what else matters to our environment? What else matters? Well, water cycle, plants matter. Plants matter, ecosystems matter, water cycles matter. Let's start there. Plants matter to our climate because plants cool the air. Plants cool the air because they cast shade. Compare a place that has a plant in a place that has either bare soil or sand or pavement, God help us. Here's a plant, here's a bare soil or sand. On a hot day, the place that has a plant is going to be much cooler. For one thing, the plant casts shade. For another thing, the plant transpires water. The plant is responsible for lots of evaporation of water, just like we humans sweat all the time. Even if it's not outside on a hot day, even if you're not exercising, we sweat all the time. There's always water coming out of our pores in the form of sweat. Plants are the same way. Humans perspire, plants transpire. A fully grown tree will transpire something on the order of 40 or 50 gallons of water per day during the growing season. And we know in our common experience, we know that cools the air, because step out of the shower, step out of the bath, step out of the pool. It feels cold. Give me a towel. It feels cold because water is evaporating. It's the same thing when we perspire. It feels cool because water is evaporating. And it's the same thing when you walk under a shade tree. It feels cool because water is evaporating. Forests have a tremendous ability to cool our climate because water is evaporating. That is only one thing that a plant does to create cooling. Water cycles create cooling. So by water cycle, I mean, when we think of water cycle, we were taught in school about rain. We were taught that water evaporates and then it forms clouds, and then those clouds condense, and then there's precipitation, and then the water flows back into the body of water. What we weren't taught is that's known as the large water cycle. Evaporate water from the ocean, the water moves inland, condenses, precipitates, flows back to the ocean. That's the large water cycle. What we weren't taught in school is the small water cycle, which is where water evaporates from plants, and then it condenses and forms clouds and precipitates and falls back down. And that is a shorter water cycle. The water doesn't have to go all the way out to the oceans and the rivers and the lakes in order to evaporate and precipitate. There's even a smaller water cycle in that, you can have an area that's a square foot, or certainly let's just say a square foot or a square meter. The plants draw water up out of the soil. They transpire the water. Some of that water condenses in the form of dew and goes back into the soil. It's absorbed back into the plant. These are water cycles. So when I talk about water cycles, I wanted to kind of orient you to what I'm talking about. Yes, it is the 4 or 5 step cycle that causes rain, but it's also just the ability of plants to hold water in the landscape. Let's look at another aspect of water and plants. Let's say you have a place here that's a square mile. I'm picturing Tom Sawyer Park in my community, which is a square mile, and it's 640 acres. But let's say you have a place that's a square mile and it's a forest. Compare that with a square mile that's not a forest, because it's been clear cut. This happens every day in America, every day across the world. We are clear cutting our forests. But compare those two places. The forest, among other things, holds a whole lot of water because a tree is about 50% water. So trees hold a lot of water. Plants hold a lot of water. The soil holds a lot of water. And compare that with a place where it's been clear cut. When you clear cut a forest, all of a sudden, all of that water is not there anymore. So so what I'm talking about affects the climate. It has a dramatic effect on our climate, because climate is not only about temperature, it's also about water cycles. Climate is not only about warming temperatures, it's about whether or not you have regulation, whether plants are regulating and moderating the temperatures, and whether plants are positively affecting the rainfall and the cool temperatures that plants and trees and forests are able to maintain where they are. Therefore, if you have net deforestation, that is a problem in terms of climate, and it's a problem because of all the wildlife that used to be there. It's a problem in terms of the flooding that you're causing from the net deforestation. And when you have deforestation, you have desertification. Desertification is when you have desertification, in my mind, is another word for degradation. Desertification doesn't just mean a place where there's a desert. It means the degradation of the land. Deforestation causes degradation. Poor land management causes degradation and therefore deforestation. Bad farming causes degradation and therefore desertification. This is happening all over the world. About 2/3 of the land areas in the world are low rainfall areas. Their rain cycles, their water cycles are somewhat fragile. But how I started off talking about this is that when you deforest, you're removing the water from the landscape. That has a dramatic impact in terms of climate. It has a dramatic impact in terms of the flooding, drought, wildfires, heat waves. The fact that scientists are not talking about this is just like that heart surgeon who claims that the heart surgeon who claims that not only is the heart an important organ, but it's the most important organ in the body. And furthermore, no other organ in the body matters. That person, no matter his training, is out of his flippin' mind. But that is the type of insanity that we're dealing with today. And if you question the mainstream narrative, you're a climate denier. Furthermore, people who are talking like this, who have this just insane theory about what's important in the world, if you don't buy into their narrow, misguided theory, then you get labeled a climate denier. That's helpful in the United States because it's partisan politics. It's like, if you're a Republican, you're a climate denier. If you have questions about climate change, you're a climate denier. If you don't pinch the incense and buy into this insane climate-related hypothesis, then you are a climate denier. It serves, Bill McKibben is on board with the insanity. Naomi Klein is on board with the insanity. Michael Mann, is it Michael Mann? He's yeah, I might have the wrong man, but whatever Mann's first name is, I've read his book. I've read his book called The New Climate Wars. And it's just an insane tirade against anybody who doesn't buy his particular version of what ought to be important related to climate. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Let me read the comments and see if I can respond intelligently, rationally, with some clarity to your comments. JMW says plants cool via hydrological cycle and respiration. Heat is moved into the soil. Okay. So how do plants cool? Plants, this water cycle is fascinating. The water cycle is such that, how do plants cool? plants absorb water from their roots up through their trunks, out through their leaves. The transpiration causes cooling right there. And then they also exude not only water vapor, but they exude or transpire particles, condensation nuclei, in the form of bacteria and in the form of compounds, organic compounds such as terpenes. The condensation nuclei helps with condensation. Condensation itself absorbs 500 calories of water per gram, 500 kilocalories of water per gram. The process of condensation causes, it's called, no, evaporation, sorry, evaporation. The process of evaporation causes 500 kilocalories per liter, 500 calories per gram, 500 kilocalories per liter of heat is hidden when evaporation takes place. It's called the latent heat of evaporation. So that's a major thing. Now, that heat doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere else. That heat is embodied in the water molecule, and then it goes up to the cloud layer. It further condenses, causing further cooling, and then it precipitates. But when it condenses in the cloud layer, it causes radiation of heat. Some of that heat radiates out into space as infrared light. So if the greenhouse effect is a problem, let's talk about how we can stop deforestation so as to cause heat to radiate out into space. The greenhouse effect is only 1%. The greenhouse effect is such that there's only 1% more heat coming in and getting trapped than there is going back out. If you could deal with that 1%, then there wouldn't be a greenhouse effect. We can deal with that 1% by increasing the plant cover on the land. We can do this in our forests. We can do this in our farms. We can do this in our landscapes. We can do this in our urban planning. We can deal with the greenhouse effect with plant cover and nothing else if we were so inclined. And somebody might say, Hart, if you do that, then what about the carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is important because carbon dioxide is causing the acidification of the oceans. Okay, the process of increasing the plant cover that I just talked to you about is a way of absorbing the carbon dioxide. Somebody might say, that lets the fossil fuel companies off the hook. If you want to talk to somebody who has a plan for reducing fossil fuel usage, talk to me. I've got that plan, but who doesn't have that plan? Climate scientists, mainstream climate scientists do not have a plan for reducing fossil fuel usage because they do not have a plan for reducing the amount of energy that we use. They're engaged in this fantasy that says we can reduce our fossil fuel usage while increasing our energy usage, and we can and then we have an ever-growing economy. GDP is when the economy grows by about 2 or 3% per year. Show me a plan that is going to decouple GDP with energy usage, and that's going to decouple energy usage with fossil fuels. The plan doesn't exist, and that's the subject for another day. JMW also says all thermal mass moved or burned causes, JMW, that is an excellent point. All thermal mass moved or burned causes global warming. Absolutely. This is the message of Tom Murphy. What else do you say here? The Earth is layered by density and inertial states. I don't quite understand what that means. In fact, I don't understand what that means at all. But when you say all thermal mass moved or burned causes global warming, I'm completely on board with that. Tom Murphy of UC San Diego, who you can see my interviews with on this channel, taught me that something about called waste heat. Tom Murphy is a physicist. Waste heat is whenever you're burning anything at all, ever, whether you're burning fossil fuels, whether you're burning wood, whether you're heating up a stove to utilize electricity. There's something called waste heat. Anytime you burn anything, it emanates waste heat. Waste heat is going at the rate of growth of our economy and the economy and our energy usage and our fossil fuel usage. The rate of growth is about 2 or 3% per year. If that rate of growth continues, then the waste heat is going to continue to grow at the same rate because it's proportional. It's a linear relationship between energy usage and waste heat, and that's going to grow at a factor of 10 per century, or it's doubling about every 30 years. So double this 30 years, and then double the next 30 years, and then double the next 30 years, and then double the next 30 years. Not too many 30-year periods have to go by before you are completely, it's inconceivable how much expansion we have in the economy, the energy, and the waste heat. And if that goes on for 100 years or 200 years, carbon dioxide is going to be trivial. Anyway, I'm here to cheer you up. I don't mean any disrespect. One last thought. I don't mean any disrespect to scientists who are doing their best. What I am trying to put into perspective is that we need critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills are not a result of just believe the science, trademark, as if anybody has a monopoly on the science. Expertise counts for a lot. Authority counts for a lot. Some authority emerges from expertise, yes, but there's no final word, especially when they're saying ridiculous things like CO2 is all that matters. We have to deal with CO2 before we can do anything else. Yeah, 70% of the wild mammals have become extinct in the last 50 years, but we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to deal with carbon dioxide. It's silly. It's obnoxious. It is an emergency. The emergency, if climate is an emergency, then 10 times that degree of emergency is the wrong-headed ideas, the complete violation of logic and science that is the mainstream climate message. That's all I have today. Thank you for joining me. Have a nice day.